Now, over in the UK, as if the Tories weren't struggling enough, now they have a betting scandal on their hands. It just puts the cherry on the cake. There's 2 weeks till polling day. Now you've got Nick Mason, who's the Conservatives' chief data officer. He's taken a leave of absence from his role because there's a probe now into his alleged use of privileged information to bet on when the election would be held. Can you believe it? Joining me now is foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. He's not the only one. I think there's 3 others who've now been implicated in all of this. How dumb can it get, Greg?
Well, it's great to be with you. I mean, I must say that the Tories are going to get smashed, and they deserve to get smashed. I think Labor is going to provide a pretty poor government, I would say. The party is a long way to the left of the leadership. It's going to embrace every woke nuttiness. It's going to try to rule through the courts. A lot of bad things are going to happen. The whole of Europe is moving to the right, but because the Tories were such a bad government, Britain is moving to the left. But honestly, so I know some of the Tory ministers, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Tom Tugendhat and Rishi Sunak himself, and I think they're all very good. They're very, very decent people, the ones I know. But there is obviously a sickness in the Conservative culture now where they haven't been willing to stand up for anything they believe in for years now, for a long, long time. And then there is a seediness about their personal behaviour. Boris Johnson was a brilliant, brilliant politician, but he really behaved in a seedy fashion without any personal discipline at all. Now, this business, you know when the election's going to be because you work for the Prime Minister. So you send your spouse out to bet with 30 different bookmakers on the date of the election so you can get high odds because you can predict the exact date. This is kind of, it's pathetic, it's greedy, it's grubby, it can't really be even a huge amount of money. They're not even clever fraudsters. They're just horrible, unattractive adolescent schoolboys who ought to go away and get a proper job. You know, the Conservative Party would be a lot better off if more of its members had had proper jobs before they went into Parliament. And this is sadly the icing on the cake, this scandal.
I couldn't agree with you more, Greg, because, you know, I mean, I love a punt, right? Not even I would be dumb enough to go and do something like that. I mean, this almost leaves fine cotton for dead in terms of a bad ring-in. And you're so right when you say that the problem is you've got so many people involved in politics, be it in the Tories or elsewhere, actually, who don't have real-life experience outside of politics. And so what this does, all the business about going off and having a bet on when the election is going to be, it reinforces people's belief that politics is full of corrupt dopes. People who couldn't make it elsewhere have managed to make it in politics, and they're all in it for themselves. And that's why people like Nigel Farage, are tipped to do reasonably well with his party, Reform UK, because he's going out there and saying, I'm not part of the political establishment, and here's yet another example of why people hate the political establishment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So Farage, I think, and Boris Johnson, the 2 most influential Conservatives of the last 10 or 15 years. Farage's great strengths, he's got 2 great strengths. He sounds like a normal person, and he takes very clear positions. So he was in favour of Brexit and he won the argument. He and Johnson won the argument. I think Farage's latest remark that, you know, the West provoked Vladimir Putin into the invasion of Ukraine is wrong, it's dismal, it's unfactual, it's deeply stupid, and it shows the limitations of his particular kind of populism. So he is an outsider and he's a maverick and he's a populist and all the rest of it. None of those words would have a bad connotation for me, but it's just barking mad to say that anyone is responsible for Vladimir Putin's murderous dictatorship other than Vladimir Putin himself. And, you know, there is a danger with some right-wingers who react against conventional wisdom so badly, so violently, that they think anything that is conventional wisdom is bad. So it's conventional wisdom that democracy is superior to savage KGB-formed totalitarianism. Therefore, we should be doubtful about that. So I think, in a way, Farage's bad misstep on Russia it probably helps the Conservatives. It probably means that some hundreds of thousands of voters who would otherwise have voted Reform are now, with a terrible weary sigh, going to return to the Conservative Party. But I think that's overall a good thing, because in the end they are the party which will form the next non-Labor government, probably in 10 or 15 years' time.
Just quickly before we go, Greg, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared the intense phase of fighting in Rafah in southern Gaza is nearly over, but of course it doesn't mean that the war's coming to an end. The IDF is now going to be deployed to the border of Lebanon, where of course the exchanges between Israeli forces and Hezbollah have been escalating. Where to for the war now?
Well, I'm glad that they're going to stop the fighting in Gaza, and I think Hamas won't come to the party over a reasonable ceasefire. The moral responsibility for the death and destruction in Gaza lies with Hamas, but Israel can simply stop the high-scale, the high-intensity violence, and I think they should. I think that's a good idea. As well as being good on humanitarian grounds, even though they haven't got the hostages, and I want them to get the hostages, it's also necessary because the IDF, the Israeli Defence Force, is very tired after this long campaign. Now, Israel has a big problem on its northern border. You know, hundreds of Israeli towns have been rendered uninhabitable by Hezbollah missiles, and something like 80,000 Israelis are still evacuated from their homes in the north. Israel can't tolerate that forever. But I think Israel wants to be careful about starting an all-out conflict with Hezbollah. On the other hand, I think there are options to do a more limited operation to try to get Hezbollah back 10 or 20 kilometres from the border, and then they can repopulate their own northern towns. Or maybe when the violence stops in Gaza, they can negotiate a modus vivendi with Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is very unreasonable. They are a terrorist group like Hamas. They're defined under Australian law as terrorists. But I don't think they want southern Lebanon to look like Gaza. So this is a very, very tense and difficult moment.
Greg Sheridan, pleasure as always. Thank you so much for joining me. When it comes to foreign affairs, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone better than Greg Sheridan in this country.